All right. Right at 9 o'clock here, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for class number 7 here. I completely forgot to change the title of this. This class is not called Conquest 1. This class is called Conquest number 4, actually. Looking at that schedule, and there are still a few printed copies in back. If we need more, please be sure to let me know, and I will get those printed. So we are here going to be covering Joshua chapters 9 and 10 this morning. Whenever I put this schedule together for class, Jay and Joshua and myself, we all met together for breakfast a couple weeks before, and Josh told me straight up he was going to be gone today, and I totally forgot about it when I built the schedule and had him scheduled to teach. So, but he's out of town today, and so I'm filling in, which I know you think it was some kind of purposeful slip that I am teaching chapter 10, but it really wasn't on purpose. But still, I'm very happy to be able to teach one of my favorite passages in the Bible, just because of its uniqueness here. So just to kind of catch us up to where we are, Jay did a great job in covering that idea of them entering into the land as they crossed over there, and some of the events that happened to get Gilgal and how the campaign started. But I'm going to present some of that again just very quickly here, somewhat graphically. So of course, looking at our map here, we covered last time I taught how they have come up from Egypt at Kadesh Barnea on the south side, then they came around up through the plains of Moab, there stopping by Mount Nebo, so Moses could leave and go up there, and that's where Moses died, to that place called Abel Shittim, or Abel Shittim, depending on the way that is translated there. Sometimes it's O-M, sometimes it's I-N at the end here. And you will notice again that in many of your maps it may even just say Shittim, simply because there were two of them, but at this point that they didn't really both exist. That Abel just tells us it's the one on the right-hand side of the Jordan River. Then, as Jay covered, they crossed the river and went to a place called Gilgal. Now, just very briefly, Jay did a great job of putting up some pictures to give you a good visual of what that looks like down in the valley of the Jordan River, and how Gilgal is not yet going up from the valley. It's still down in that floodplain area there. But just some things to remember. We're going to see over the next several weeks, this name Gilgal keeps coming up because it is their primary camp during the conquest. So they move across the river, they destroy Jericho, and now, because you may remember that, of course, Jericho and Gilgal are not very far apart. They are both down in that plain, with Jericho just being ready to go up on top of the mountain there. And so when they take Jericho, then they will stay here at Gilgal for pretty much the entirety of the conquest, okay? Primarily, the conquest takes about 5 years for it to complete. So for the better part of 5 years, they are going to be camped here at Gilgal. We know it takes about 5 years because in Joshua chapter 14 and verse 10, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but this is where Caleb is saying, hey, let me go and fight the worst people who are left in the land, because I'm now 85 years old, and what is true about him at 85?
He's old.
Well, yeah, he was old, that is true. But even at 85, what does he say? Here I am, 85, and I'm still able to do what? To go and fight just as it was when I was younger, okay? And Caleb actually gives us the timeline there. He says, I was 40 years old when Moses sent me into the land as a spy. And we know they wandered for how long? For 40 years. And now it's 5 years. He's 85. So they wandered around about 40 years, took some time to come around, and the conquest itself takes about 5 years. So when the conquest is over, he is 85. The tent of meeting is set up here, and pretty much there seems to be one possible time when it may leave, but for the most part, the tabernacle and the priests remain there at Gilgal for the entirety of the conquest. It's not like sometimes later where we're told they take the Ark of the Covenant and it goes before the army. The only time we're told that is really Jericho, right? Which is really not leaving that area. It's just right in that same place there. Okay. So at Gilgal, there are some big events that happen before Jericho is taken. The first one of those is that memorial of 12 stones is built. What made those 12 stones special? Anybody remember? That's right. They were taken out of the center of the River Jordan. So as they were crossing over on dry land, the head of each tribe was told to pick up a stone. And it wasn't just like a stone like this. It was a stone. They probably took several of them in a cart to move it. And then from those stones, they make this tabernacle, which would be a reminder in a way for them to tell future generations, hey, this is what happened here. The first Passover is kept. We see that the Israelites now are going to start receiving the benefits of taking over the land, and they're going to receive and eat of the land. They're going to eat of harvest that they did not sow. So for the first time, they're going to take that. And because they now are given by God a different source of substance, that substance is going to be the produce of the land, what stops there at Gilgal? The manna, that's right. Okay, so the manna and the quail, it doesn't specifically say the quail, but the quail has been going on too. So the manna and the quail stop here at Gilgal. Of course, we have this other interesting story here, which Jay covered a little bit, this idea, and I'm not going to go into it in super great detail here, but Joshua encounters this strange person. He walks up and sees this man who he instantly recognizes as not just a man, but somebody who looks like a man, somebody special. And he goes up and he asks him, are you for us or against us? And we have this interesting answer. The man says what? He says, neither, right? I'm not for you or against you. He's instead for who? He's for God, okay? So whether, what he is basically saying there, and I don't remember how much Jay talked about this, but basically what he's saying is I'm here as the commander of the Lord's army. I'm going to fight for the Lord. Whether I'm fighting for you or against you is going to depend on what? You. On you, that's right, exactly, okay? And we see that it seems like he fights on both sides here very quickly to determine what those battle is going to be here, okay? So who was this commander of the army of the Lord? There's some question about that. I personally believe that it is one of the few named Bibles that we few named angels that we have in the Bible. My mouth can't keep up with my brain sometimes. And so we do find out about this angel, sometimes called an archangel or a prince angel, called Michael. And he seems to be the one who is always depicted as being the one who is fighting the battles on the spiritual realm. We find in Jude chapter 1 and verse 9, the very strange passage that Satan wanted to do something with the body of Moses, that nobody knows where it's buried but God and the spiritual beings. And Michael was sent to fight over that body and to defeat Satan, to make sure that Moses' body was left where it was supposed to be. We don't really know. But again, he was fighting for one of God's people. And then, of course, in Daniel chapter 10, verses 13 through 21, in one of the visions there, we see some repeated mentions how that Michael is the one who fights and he is the one who is needed to help fight against the prince of the east, and all this kind of stuff that, again, we have no idea what it means. I wish I did. I can't tell you how bad I wish I did, but we just don't really know. However, there is some interesting statements there that's repeated a couple times in that passage where it talks about Michael's primary job is to be the prince or the protector, depending on your translation, of Israel. That is his job, is to, on the spiritual plane, to fight those battles. So just based on those verses, that's what I tend to believe that is who Joshua runs into here. And so now we are going to have Joshua, who is going to be the commander of the physical army, and Michael, or some other angelic spiritual being, who is going to be the commander of the spiritual army, and they are going to go to battle, and their purposes are going to be aligned as long as Joshua and the people are aligned with God. Okay? If they're not aligned with God, then Michael is not going to be, or whoever it is not going to be for them. So then, of course, we know that they move on to Jericho, which is not very far. They don't really have to go much of anywhere, but they camp around it. And I'm not going to go into a bunch of details. Again, it's a very well-known story. For the first 6 days, they march around the city once. The priests are blowing the trumpet, but all the people are told, you don't no sound, you don't talk to each other, you just be quiet for those 6 days while they're marching around. Probably really freaked the people of Jericho out to see, that many people marching around. And then on the 7th day, they march around the city 7 times, 7 full revolutions around the city. And then after the 7th time, now they can speak. And in fact, they're told not just speak, but make a great shout. And that great shout would be God giving them the victory. Of course, we know the walls fall down flat, or they crumble. The walls fall so that each person, if you imagine that circle, the walls fall so that all of them can just go straight up. It's not just one point of entry. It's not one gate that's broken down. The entire wall is dismantled, and all of the army just goes in at once. Okay, so complete and total victory. And of course, out of that, we know Rahab was saved, just as was promised by the spies there. Any questions about Jericho or the fall of Jericho?
It made a reputation that either nations heard about how God acted for Israel, and they were fearful.
Yeah, they absolutely made a reputation. Actually, Rahab had already said, you already have a reputation, because everybody in the land knows what you did, what God did for you in Egypt, and he knows what you did on the east side of the Jordan. But now we're going to see in our verses for today, this is going to have a big impact on the people of the land. Okay? So of course, then we have the defeat at Ai. Ai is such a small little city. The guys they send to spy it out say, we don't all need to go. So only 3,000 men are sent. So again, if we were looking at our map here, the army is sitting here at Jericho. This is immediately following the victory at Jericho. They don't really camp, but they make that trip over there to Ai, and they start to have the battle here. And what happens? Yeah, they got to run, right? Okay, so they hightail it back to Jericho, those 3,000 men, because they're defeated. They cannot stand against the men of Ai, and 36 people die. It specifically calls out 36 people die. So still 1%, which any victory like that where you would lose only 1% of your fighting force, that would be a pretty good victory, right? Especially during this time. So what does that tell us about Jericho? What probably happened when they took Jericho? Yeah, probably nobody died, right? Because now if all of a sudden 36 people dying, terrible for their families, but it's not really some kind of tragic defeat. Only 1%, and we had to run away because of that? It's kind of strange. Well, of course, if they were used to God winning all the battles for them, and they barely had to fight themselves, now all of a sudden, it seems like now that commander of the Lord's army is against them and helping Ai to defeat them here. course, we talked about the sin of Achan is found out. Basically, he stole some treasure and hid it in his tent. So we get this really radical punishment. Him and his entire family and everything he owns is carved out and taken out from the camp. And there they are all stoned and burned, and then stones heaped on top of them. It's always been one of those stories that we say, is the punishment justified? Is the punishment indicative of the sin? I'm glad that's not my call, but it is justified because who made the call? God did. Okay, so for whatever reason, we don't know all the details of why this is what happened, but there is a clear, we are going to not only just make sure this doesn't happen again, we are going to just completely carve out that sin from among the people and make sure that absolutely nothing that was associated with that is going to stay with us. We are going to completely get rid of all of that. So after that, they decide to try again with Ai. Of course, actually it's God who says you're going to try again. So God says, go ahead and take that. The sin of Achan has been purged, and God is with them this time. So an ambush is set up. They split their forces actually into three, if you read through the scriptures. Some are sent to lay in wait behind the city of Ai, between the city of Ai and Bethel. Some are going to be held in ambush on the east side of Ai. And then, of course, Joshua is going to lead the rest. And when he gets to the city, he's going to pretend to run. Because that's what happened last time, right? They went and fought, and then they ran, and the people chased them. So they're going to try to get him to do it again. And then, of course, we know the trap is sprung. And this time, not just Ai, but both Ai and Bethel are taken here. So again, in our map now, we are going to send one group to lay in wait up there between Ai and Bethel on the other side of Ai. A second group is going to be held there on the east side to lay in wait when the army is chasing Joshua, and then he goes up there, and of course we have this great battle. And this time now they fall. Okay. Then, of course, after that battle, it says they're going to go back to where? You might as well just get used to saying this, because after every one of these campaigns, they go back to Gilgal. That's right. Okay, so they go back to Gilgal, and that's where they're going to hang out here for a little bit. Okay. When they get back, Joshua renews the covenant. So just like we mentioned before that Joshua is the new Moses, and so he's going to do things very similar to the old Moses. And so just like when Moses had initiated the covenant, they build an altar, they make a sacrifice, the words of the law are written on stone, just like Moses had the words of the law written on stone. Probably really just refers to those 10 commandments. And then the entirety of the law of Moses, which was written down, is then read to all of the people. And then we made the comment on Wednesday here about this idea that we really see for the first time that many non-Jews are included in this. They are starting to be integrated into the nation of Israel here. So there in chapter 8, verse 33, it says, all Israel, both the sojourner as well as the native born. Now, some people have argued which is which, right? That the native born are those born in Canaan, but we see from the next verse that really the native born are those who are Jews because of their lineage, and then the sojourner are going to be the people from the land who are now, and of course, a bunch of Egyptians left Egypt with them, right, and came with them. So now we have all of this group that are these outside people who are living with them. And then, of course, in chapter 8 and verse 35, it says, all the assembly of Israel and the women and the little ones and the sojourners who lived among them. So again, we have this, the first time mentioning that the sojourners who lived among them are called part of the assembly of Israel here. All right, before we actually get into chapter 9, then any comments on any of that or questions I can answer?
Question.
Yeah.
One commentary mentions that these non-Jews may have been, the timing may have been Gibeonites instead of, I'm just asking what you think about that. That portion actually occurred after they took Gibeon.
Yeah, so the comment, for those of you who couldn't hear, is that Could these people who are listed as sojourners have been the Gibeonites? Because this could be a summary passage, and entirely possible. It doesn't seem like it to me. It seems like this is, okay, we've had our first kind of battle here. We really messed up with Achan, and then God won us, so now we're going to recommit, and we're going to renew the covenant, is what it seems to me. Yeah. But it's definitely possible. Several times in the book of Joshua, there are summary statements made and then more detail given after that summary statement. And in fact, we're going to go over one here this morning. Okay, so just as Bobby mentioned here, now that there has been this great victory, the people in the land are going to react to this victory both in Jericho and Ai. The people around them have noted what is going on. And at the beginning of chapter 9 here, let's go ahead and read just, I'm not going to read a ton, but we'll read a couple verses here. Verses 1 and 2, chapter 9, verse 1. And as soon as all the kings who were beyond the Jordan in the hill country and in the lowland, all along the coast of the great sea toward Lebanon, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites heard of this, they gathered together as one to fight against Joshua and Israel. So the vast majority of people decide, hey, we have to start fighting together. And that actually makes a ton of sense, right? If you have a bunch of these small city kingdoms, and now here is this entire migrating nation with tens of thousands of prime soldiers, maybe as many as a million men here. So an entire group of people, maybe 3, 4, 5 million people. There's no way these individual little city-states can win against that, right? There's no way. So they wisely decide we need to band together here. However, we're told in chapter 9 the story about one city. Actually, it ends up being a small group of cities that make up the kingdom of Gibeon. They decide that they want to take a different approach here to trying to fight together with everybody. They, of course, feel that it's hopeless to fight against Israel. They say there's no way that we can defeat their God and that we can defeat them. And they're right. That's a very astute assumption here. So they're going to seek out how can we make peace. Unfortunately here, and of course we don't know, Joshua does ask them, hey, if you were our neighbors, why would we make a deal with you? But they go about it the entire wrong way here. So in reality, they fake the distance, okay? They fake the distance that they are from Joshua and the people. And how close are they really? Does anybody know?
Really, but you're our neighbor.
Yeah, that's right. It's not very far, okay? So it's somewhere between 50 or 60 miles. It's really closer to 35 miles as the crow flies, but of course this is very hilly country, so it would be 50 to 60 miles of travel. There's no straight path there. When they are going slow and when they are taking their time, it's a 3-day journey, we find in chapter 9 and verse 17. So when all the people go when the army goes to see them, it takes them 3 days to get there. But of course, they pretend that it's taken them forever to get there. And what do they try to fake in order to convince Joshua and the people that they've been traveling forever?
Their clothing, they came out and stuff.
Yeah.
Never wears out. And then the food, they say, we just brought this hot out of the oven. And now look at it, it's all moldy.
Crumbly and dry, that's right. Okay, so one of these is only mentioned in one place, but so they wear worn out clothes, their clothing, even their shoes have holes in them. It specifically calls out there. They have worn out luggage. The packs that they put on their donkeys are all full of holes and patched and really worn out wineskins, and of course they now have this terribly stale bread. So, not terribly convincing, I wouldn't think, that this is a long journey, because in order for, your bread to get stale, that could only take, let's say even a month, which your bread would be way stale before that. But really for your clothes to wear out and to say, I put on brand new shoes and now they've got holes and they're falling apart, that's a long time travel, okay, that they are pretending here. So why did Joshua fall for this? Chapter 9 and verse 14, if you don't know. That's right, they didn't ask God, okay? And so it says, so the men took some of their provisions, but did not ask counsel from the Lord here. They didn't seek God's advice. They didn't seek his answer. They just on their own go ahead and make this deal. Some amount of time is spent negotiating this deal. We're not told all of the details of it, but yet peace is made. And the key element here that the people of Gibeon wanted a promise from Joshua was that they wouldn't kill them. Okay, we don't know any of the details, but they do promise, we won't kill you. Of course, the deception is very quickly discovered. We're told here that it takes them 3 days to figure out that they have been deceived. So after the peace is made and the Gibeonites leave, then somehow, we're not told how, but Joshua and the people learn that actually, as Bobby mentioned, there actually are neighbors is the word that it uses there. All of modern translations translate that the same. And so as soon as they hear this, all right, now we got to go fix this. And so the army marches. And this is where it takes the army 3 days to get to their group of cities. It actually lists a group of cities there. So after 3 days, they arrive at the cities of Gibeon. And what do the people want to do when they get there? And these people have just deceived us. And they made us sign this phony peace treaty with them. So what do the people want to do? Yeah, kill them. That's right. We're going to go kill them. Okay? However, the Joshua and the elders, they don't allow it. They say, no, you can't do this because we agreed, we made a covenant with them. They actually say before God we made a covenant, even though they didn't ask God about it. So they don't allow it. And the people get really angry about this, actually. Hey, wait a minute. These people lied to us. So instead of killing them all, what does Joshua do? I mean, he says to them, hey, you lied to us. And they basically say, well, you were going to kill us anyway, so if you're going to kill us, just go ahead, because there's nothing we can do about it. That's right. That's right. So they decide to make them into servants. It never uses the word slaves here, and it seems like they are left, they're definitely not taken out of the cities. They are left to be there, okay? However, it says that they are turned into cutters of wood and drawers of water. And this seems to be for a good long time, not just even during the conquest, but into when a house of the Lord is going to be built in the future. They do that. So, of course, then the southern kings react to this. Remember, Moses had agreed at the beginning of chapter 9 that they were going to fight together. And specifically, the king of the Amorites that is closest to them is the king of Jerusalem, called Jebusalem at the time. Actually, not Jerusalem quite yet, but it's called Jerusalem here. And so now, I was worried enough when it was just the Israelites, but now Gibeon has made a peace treaty with them, and Gibeon apparently was a pretty major force in the area, so now he's even more worried. Okay, and so he calls up the other Amorite kings to come and join him. Hey, let's go get Gibeon while they're still small and before they can really join with Joshua. Let's go wipe out this potential source of help for Joshua and his army, and let's just go ahead and get them right now. So, again, on our map here, we have 5 cities that are going to join together. So Eglon here is the farthest away. Oops, I messed up my fancy graph. So Eglon is going to come up. Lachish, a city that's not listed on here, is going to come up also. No, I can't remember the name of it. Jarmuth is the name of the other city. So they are all 4 of those cities are going to send all of their soldiers up to Jerusalem. And then from Jerusalem, they're going to go attack who? Gibeon. That's right. So they're going to march up that short way from Jerusalem, and they're going to attack Gibeon here. So of course now, Gibeon calls out for help. They're outnumbered, they're under siege, and now they call on Joshua. Come to us quickly and save us and help us. Okay, don't forget, you made us treaty. Now really, in truth, what did Joshua and the elders just agreed to that we know of? yeah, we won't kill you. But now the Gibeonites push it further and say, hey, come and help us because we're going to get destroyed. And actually, this time, apparently, Joshua has learned that I shouldn't do anything without asking God, because he talks to God about it. And God says what? Yeah, go help them. That's right, okay? Go. Don't worry about it. Even though it's these 5 kings, I got you. You go and take this battle here. So the army marches all night. We don't know when they left, but it takes them that day and all night to get there. So whatever, it took them 3 days before, they now march it overnight, in one day and overnight. And in the morning, they fall on the besieging army and attack here. So again, in our map here, just imagine that around Gibeon, you've got this army very similar to what Joshua and those people did, surrounding the town of Gibeon, sieging to it. And now Joshua is going to come probably via Jericho, because that's the way to get up the mountains from the plain, and then he is going to come and fall on them from behind here. It's important to note that Joshua and his armies are coming from the east, okay? Because that's going to make more sense, some things that happen here in just a second. Now, I'm going to just do this on the map here to save some time, and we're not going to read in detail all the events that happen here, mostly because I pretty much have chapter 10 somewhat memorized. And so now we are here at Gibeon, and Joshua's army shows up, and so now they have to run. And you think, well, wait a minute, they came from Jerusalem, which is back to the east and the south. Why wouldn't they run that way? Well, why can't they run that way? Who just came from the east? Joshua and the whole army, okay? So now they can't go back the way that they came, so they have to go away from Joshua's army. So they're going to actually run up through this area called Beth Horan. And you'll notice here there are 2 dots on the map that are both labeled Beth Horan here. It's called Upper and Lower Beth Horan. Beth Horan is on the side of a mountain, and I looked for a great picture, but of course there's no pictures of this time, and it's so built up right now, and there's a great big modern highway there that really just, they've built it up, and it doesn't look anything like a ascent anymore, other than it's a highway that's pretty steep. This was a pretty famous part of the country. This map doesn't have the topographical here. But if you can just imagine, of course, we know that there is that mountain range that runs right along the Dead Sea and the Jordan River. Then there's a valley, and then it starts to peak back up again by Jerusalem and Gibeon, and then it starts to fall down again on the other side to the plain. And so Beth Horan is one of those cities that actually exists at the top of the mountain and down in the plain. There's Upper and Lower Beth Horan. So the combined army of these 5 kings, they can't retreat to Jerusalem because they'd have to go through Joshua's whole army. So they are going to take that way over to Upper Beth Horan, and then they are going to go down on the ascent. And it says there that while they were traveling, God sent hailstones down on them while they were going down that descent. And in fact, those hailstones, it says, follow them all the way to Azekah and Makkedah there. Actually, God killed more of them with the hailstones than the Israelites did with the sword. The question comes up, well, what were they? Were they actual stones? Was it hail? The answer is we don't know. Some people say there's no way that it could have been what we would consider hail. It actually uses the term for hailstones here. And so, of course, God could do whatever he wanted, but even just normal course of events, I found some of these pictures. That's the largest recorded hailstone that has been kept, that fell in somewhere in the United States, I forget where. Over almost a foot across at its widest point, and weighs about 7 pounds. So imagine that flying from the sky. Some people around here may remember, it was before we got here, but the hailstorm in Bowling Green that did a ton of damage, and the largest hail recorded that time was around golf ball size, from what I've been told. And look at the damage it did. I mean, going right through windshields and people's roofs and all that kind of stuff.
I was living then. I saw it in front of my store. the size of baseball.
Okay, so Bobby saw some size of baseballs then. So this is, even if we say a baseball, this is probably 10, 12 times the size of a baseball. And this one is actually, it's very large, but it's very loosely packed bunch of ice. This one fell last year in Texas. It was kept one solid chunk of ice that weighed 12 pounds, 9 inches across. Can you imagine that falling from the sky and hitting you? I don't care what kind of helmet you're wearing. You ain't going to survive that for very long. So whether it was actual stones that fell from the sky, some people think that maybe there was a volcano erupted that God used to bring stones, or he used actual hail like we would traditionally think of hail. It doesn't really matter. The point is that God killed more of them than the Israelites themselves did by those hailstones. So those hailstones start falling, and primarily fall there on the descent from Beth Horan there. And then we're going to see the army continues to flee through Ajalon, and then they end up just outside of the cities of Makkedah and Azekah here. And that is where Joshua and his army catch up to them, just outside of those cities, and it begins the major battle. So it really seems like Joshua marched all night from Gilgal, falls upon them first thing in the morning, maybe even still dark out, who knows, I'm speculating there a little bit. But by the time the army flees and Joshua chases them all the way around there, we get this very spectacular verse here, just again, showing Joshua, my hero here, of course. At that time, Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the sons of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, sun stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. Is it not written in the book of Jasher, which we don't have? The sun stopped in the midst of heaven, and did not hurry to set for about a whole day. And of course, probably one of my favorite passages in the entire Bible, there has been no day like it before or since, when the Lord heeded the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. What does this say about Joshua, that he is able to do this? For years, I used to think, well, man, how is Joshua able to command the Lord, or to just speak and God listens to him? Well, another person who shares his name, roughly 2,000, maybe 1,500 years later, says something. So the words of another Joshua. And he said to them, because of your little faith. This is where, of course, the disciples are asking Jesus why they were unable to cast out certain types of demons. And he said to them, because of your little faith, for truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. If you want an example of that being true, who is the best example of that in the Bible? It's Joshua. Imagine Joshua's faith to just be able to stand there fighting the battle and say, we need more time for this. Sun, you stop. Moon, you stop. And it happens. How did it happen? Jesus gave us the answer. Joshua had an unbelievable amount of faith, and he was able to do the impossible. Okay? Now, what happened to my... Oh, man. I had a nice little sun and moon and everything. What happened to it? Oh, bummer. Okay. So, immediately after this, the text can cause some confusion. This is exactly what I was talking about here. That in Joshua chapter 10 and verse 15, it says, so Joshua returned and all the Israel with him to the camp at Gilgal. But this is just summary. Okay? This is summary of what happens here. In chapter 10, verses 16 to 42 are the details about the end of the battle and how this all works out. So when you read in chapter 10 and verse 15 that Joshua returned and all Israel with him to the camp at Gilgal, and you read exact same words in chapter 10, verse 43, Joshua returned and all Israel with him to the camp at Gilgal, those are the same thing. Okay? So don't get confused like they went back to Gilgal and now they're going to come back and have to finish up this battle. No, the rest of chapter 10 is just giving us some details. So of course here, 3 kings hide. They escape the battle and they go to the other side of Makeda, and they are sealed up in a cave. And I found this years ago, and it's an interesting use of Legos here. So it tells the story in Legos here. So Joshua chapter 10 and verse 16, the 5 Amorite kings that had fled, they're found hiding in a cave. Joshua tells them, seal it up, put some big rocks over the front of the cave. You don't mess with them right now. We got to finish up this battle, then we'll go deal with them. Okay? So then, of course, after the battle happens, they go back to the cave. They brought out the 5 kings of the kingdoms of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, those 5 that had sent the armies here. They bring them out in front of all of Israel, and Joshua calls to his commanders and to the leaders of the people, says, come here and put your feet on the necks of these kings. So they make them bow down, and they put their feet on their necks. It's kind of a cool little picture here. And I will warn you, this gets a little bit adult here. After they do that, and Joshua says, hey, don't worry anymore. This same kind of power, which, think about it, what putting your foot on someone's neck, I mean, if you want to kill them, what do? You just step, and that's it. Okay? That's how vulnerable they are, so that's what Joshua is trying to teach them here. And he says, this is what God is going to do for all of our enemies here in the fight. It then says, Joshua turns right around and kills them all. This guy chose to pop off the heads of the Lego people. Of course, we don't know if that's what he really did. He kills them and then hangs them on a tree. Very adult usage of Legos here. But then, of course, after that, they take them, and I don't know why this makes me laugh, a Lego guy throwing a Lego person's head in a cave. But they get all the bodies, they throw them back in the cave, and then they seal it up here. Of course, I have to give credit that this guy says you can feel free to use my stuff in any of your Bible classes. Just tell people where you got it. So there is a place called thebrickbible.com. He does the entire Bible in Legos. It's pretty cool, but it's very adult. This is not childhood Sunday school material, as Nikki and I found out to our somewhat shocking surprise this morning. There is a sister site that he makes just for kids called The Brick Bible for Kids. So if you want to see a much more PG version without the blood and some other things that I won't talk about, you can go to that, thebrickbibleforkids.com. It's really pretty cool. So now they have to mop up this whole situation here. So they've now defeated the main army, they've defeated the kings and killed them, and so now they're going to go on this, what's sometimes called the southern tour here, and basically they're going to go to all the places that had fought against them, and now they've beaten the armies, now they're just going to go take the cities. So they start there with Makeda and Azekah right there. They go ahead and take those cities completely because they're there, burn them to the ground. They move on to Libnah, which we believe is, some maps will show it, I believe it's on the plain side. Some maps will show it on the mountain side of that line between Azekah and Lachish. But then they go to Libnah, and then they go on to Lachish, and while they're taking Lachish, another city that's not shown up here, Gezer, which becomes more famous later as a city of the Philistines, they decide, well, maybe we can help. They must have some kind of treaty with the city of Lachish, so they send their armies down there, and of course Joshua just smites them very quickly, no problem whatsoever. They then move on to Eglon, which you remember was the farthest city away from Jerusalem. Then they go back up to Hebron, and then down and take Debir. So they have now defeated all of the major armies in the south. We find a summary there at the end of chapter 10, which basically says from Kadesh Barnea up to Gideon, all of the major armies have now been defeated in this region here, from the coast to the Dead Sea. Interesting that they don't go and destroy Jerusalem. They've killed the king of Jerusalem. They've defeated their army, but they do not go back and destroy the city of Jerusalem. Personally, I think we know why, that Jerusalem is going to become an important city to God later. So they don't go and destroy that city now. But after all of this battle, they then, as we're going to see several times here, Joshua and all of Israel return to Gilgal. That's right. So they make the journey back up to Gilgal. They go back to the camp there. And there's actually rest for a brief time here. After this whirlwind battle through the south, there's going to be a period of rest here before we would get to what's going to happen next, which Jay will cover on Wednesday. Any other questions or anything I can answer? We've got, well, no, we don't. It's time. Thank you.